We have a crisis in Sierra Leone. We have a crisis in Guinea-Bissau. We have a crisis in the Cameroons. If you come to the southern part of Africa, we have the more visible crisis, which is going to be settled hopefully in Zimbabwe. We have a crisis of some sorts in Zambia, in Angola, in Lesotho, in Swaziland. In the Horn, we have a crisis, as you know, in Somalia. We have one in Eritrea. In the East African area, we have a crisis in South Sudan. We have one in Burundi, and we also have one here, which has yet to be settled. So that when one talks about leadership and governance, without defining what these are, we must pose the foundational question, who is a leader? Because Africa suffers, in my view, from a crisis of leadership. As early as 1983, Nigeria's Chinua Achebe, in a book that could very well be titled The Trouble with Africa, but is titled The Trouble with Nigeria, says, and I agree, that the problem of Africa is simply and squarely a problem of leadership. And we must therefore make a distinction between occupation of a leadership position and leadership. There are many individuals in this country, as in most African countries, who occupy positions of leadership, but they are not leaders. And that, I think, is the problem of Africa. I remember as a young boy growing up in this city, and I remember so very vividly in those days when the City Council of Nairobi worked, when you could drink water directly from the tap, when we as primary school children had hot lunch at 1 on a daily basis, when garbage collection was undertaken, as some commentators said at that time, as regularly as a religious ritual, when the Kenya school equipment functioned, and I had textbooks and exercise books every so often, the institutions worked. Things happened as they ought to happen. And then some of us went to school, including many who are here. We acquired degrees at graduate level, at master's level, at PhD level, and then we were given the opportunity to govern our institutions. We started by killing the Kenya Railways, and it died and we buried it. We then went to yet another institution in East African Airways. We went and killed it. We occupied institutions in the textile industry. We killed it. We went into the sugar industry and killed it. So that today, as I speak, in this country, as in most, we have almost admitted that we are incapable of running our affairs. So that Kenya Airways, we have now invited a poll to come and revive it. We cannot run it. So that Uchumi, which we bought from on a daily basis, somehow collapsed. So that Kenya Meat Commission collapsed even as we continue to eat meat. This is the tragedy in which we find ourselves. And I want, without pontificating, to tell you that we are not going to realize our potential until we have a change of mind. We can hold seminars, we can have luncheons such as this at which you call the best speakers in the world, but we'll not realize our potential. Then at a certain stage we thought that our problem was the Constitution. And I remember I was very deeply involved in it. And we went round the country. We posed questions to Kenyans of many kinds. Then we came up with a constitution. And we sat, I remember so very vividly, for 111 days at the Bomas of Kenya, and came up with a draft constitution which we thought would address the Kenyan problems of both leadership and governance. The politicians took it away to Kilifi, subjected it to their own short-term interventions. It was subjected to a referendum. We rejected it. And after we nearly consumed ourselves in the year 2007, 2008, we gave ourselves the 2010 Constitution, which was essentially a ceasefire document. And we started to implement that Constitution in the hope, among other things, that when we devolve certain powers of a political nature and of an economic nature without changing ourselves and our attitudes, that devolution would simply be the magic bullet, that it was the magic wand that would change Kenya dramatically. 5 years down the line, what we have is a band of 47 plus thieves who have stolen from this country and who will never be punished because impunity stands in our way. Without exception, almost, in 5 years, all the men and women, particularly they were all men that we elected as governors, have become multi-millionaires on a salary of no more than 700,000. And we Kenyans don't even question it. The imams don't question it in the mosques. The bishops don't question it in the churches. We all sing their praises and we call them leaders. And we assume that by some magic we will change for the better. The answer is no. History has demonstrated time without number and consistently that if you want things that require effort, you must make effort. We don't. History has demonstrated time without number that if you want to do the right things, you must do the right things. Today, as I speak to you, we are one of the few countries in the world where our doctors were on strike for 4 months and it was normal. Our nurses were on strike for 4 months and it was normal. Our lecturers are on strike and it is normal. We have normalized the absurd. And when we normalize the absurd, what it means is that we can never realize our potential. We still, of course, say that we are the biggest economy in East Africa. We may very well be big, but our GDP is no more than 60 billion United States dollars. That is less than the money that Bill Gates has. In other words, all the 40 million of us plus all our labor, goods and services combined is less than the wealth of a single individual in the United States of America. So when you talk about big economy, this is not a big economy. This is a Mickey Mouse economy. We are only big when you are comparing us to Burundi, when you are comparing it to South Sudan. We are a dwarf, slightly taller than other dwarfs. And I'm submitting to us that going forward we must ask these fundamental questions. I have had the privilege and advantage of serving in 3 quasi-governmental organizations. I'm now serving one in the tail end of my contract. And what amazes me with governmental relationship is the irrelevant question that I'm asked by bureaucracies. How many people from how many tribes do you have? One organization asked me in the quarterly report. Another one asks me to declare my wealth. And half of the wealth declarations, in fact 90%, is all lies. The things you see in the so-called wealth declarations by government officials, 99% is lies. If you are to look at what they own, if it is men, they have hidden their property in the names of their mistresses and wives and in the maiden names, and they have companies which are owned by their drivers, and we know it. And then we think that we are going to thrive as a nation. I'm submitting to us that all of us who are present here, who have had the advantage of leading institutions, ask yourself the foundational question: How have you led the institution? Do you come at platforms such as this because typically your typical African bureaucrat reads statements and speeches which have been written for them? They are not wedded to what is in those positions. They give you statistics that they have no idea about. The reason why they appear to succeed is because their bureaucracies have their own kind of momentum that keeps them going. I had the privilege and advantage last week of watching the proceedings of APEC in Vietnam and subsequently the meeting of the Asian countries in Philippines. And I listened keenly for a whole week to the debates that were going on at the assembly of the Chinese party in Beijing for a whole week. You see the difference. Typically, in many African countries, before I come to the crux of my submission, and there is no shortage of these in Africa, we are going for a benchmarking meeting in Australia. Padium driven. They choose the farthest destinations, Colombia, Australia, Papua New Guinea, while the thing that they are going to look for is how to grow groundnuts. They could go to Mwanza in Tanzania, but they don't choose that. And it is you and me who have gone to school. You and me. If Africa is failing, it is not because of the old woman in rural Taveta, no. It is you and me who have chains of degrees after our names. We are the ones who have failed Africa. We are the ones who have failed Kenya. We are the ones who now, as we talk about leadership and governance, we are busy on our Twitter and WhatsApp sending some of the most caustic, some of the most toxic messages. We, you and me, we are the culprits. So the question that you pose this afternoon is, what are our priorities in leadership and what are the governance priorities for this country? This is a great country in prospect. This is a country that has been resilient in many ways. Despite the difficulties that we have had, we are still one of the few African countries that pays salaries to its civil service. You go to the Democratic Republic of Congo, the civil servants have not been paid for the last 6 months. In Niger for the last 7 months, in Central African Republic for the last 1.5 years. They have not been paid. At least here we still pay. Institutions still run. Because amidst all these thieves that we have in this country, there is no other word to describe this. There are still a few good men and women who keep this institution and this country running. And the beauty of it is that the good ones outnumber the bad ones. That is the beauty. That is the reason why we continue to survive. So when we talk about leadership, we must ask ourselves, what is leadership? You know, the other day and a week before, I saw in the newspaper somebody who belongs to the clergy saying that in order to solve Kenya's problems, introduce the office of a prime minister. I said, what a scatterbrain. There's no other word. Introduce the office of a prime minister, then all our problems will disappear without a whimper. Even today, in the newspaper, one of the newspapers says, in comparing the position of a member of parliament in the East African community and a Kenyan parliament, it says that being a member of parliament in Kenya is better because they earn 621,000 Kenya shillings and they have mileage and they also control the lucrative CDF. I thought the CDF was for purposes of developing constituencies. How can it possibly be lucrative? Unless you are saying there is a license to steal. Even the newspapers think that it is the duty of an individual elected into a position of responsibility to be a thief. In fact, when President Kenyatta constitutes his cabinet in a few weeks' time, when one is appointed into the Ministry of Energy, you see the newspaper saying he's been appointed into the lucrative Ministry of Energy. That is how we think. And I'm submitting to us that that is not leadership. Leadership is about service. I was listening yesterday to an old speech of Elimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere, and he was talking about leadership and about how he served. And he said in Kiswahili, Ikulu ni mahali patakatifu. Ukichaguliwa kuwa rais, wajulishe marafiki zako, mke wako na ndugu zako na kwamba ukuchaguliwa kuligeuza ikulu pango la walanguzi. Unfortunately, in many African countries, in every little office that we occupy, we think there is an opportunity still. And they have this saying, this self-serving saying, that whose goat have I eaten? You've eaten our goat. So I'm submitting to us that in order to have leadership at the centerpiece of our development, whether it's politically, whether it's economically or otherwise, we must see leadership as an opportunity to offer service in a selfless fashion. Easier said than done. You know, as I look at Kenya today, I ask myself, where are the leaders? Where are they? Where are they in politics? Because many of the individuals whom we elected into public office are not leaders. They simply occupy those positions either because they were elected by people from their ethnicity or they bribed the electorate. Where are the leaders who want to serve this country selflessly? When we look at the leaders, the captains of industry in governmental institutions, where are the leaders? How did we succeed? And I'm using the word succeed very advisedly. How did we succeed in bringing the Kenya Post and Telecommunication down? How did we? How did we succeed in bringing Kenya Airways down? I want to be told. How did we succeed in bringing Uchumi down? How? How did we succeed in bringing Mumias down? How did we succeed in bringing Kikomi and Mountex down? How did we succeed in bringing Kenya Meat Commission down? How? Somehow we did. Somehow we did. And there were leaders even at that time. There was governance complete with strategic plans, complete with quarterly reports, complete with performance contracts. They were there. All these structures that have now been introduced into the arena, which we are so quick to sign, were there. And yet these institutions like Humpty Dumpty came tumbling down with the consequent loss of jobs and lives. How did we succeed? What is it that was wrong with us? Those of you who have had the advantage of occupying governmental positions, what is wrong with us? There is a sense in which the priority of this nation in terms of leadership and governance is to identify where the problem is. Once you have identified the problem, then you can begin to look for the solution. To ask the question, is the problem one which is of an economic nature around the country? Remember that we have very many young Kenyans who have graduated and are looking for jobs. Have you ever asked yourself, how is it that our political leaders call for a meeting during the weekday and they have numbers? Where do they get those numbers? It means that they are young men and women who are not gainfully engaged. How are we going to deal with them? Because you and me, who are of the middle class and live generally in very good places, you have KK guards and security guards. Some of us even have panic buttons very close to our beds, in the hope that when the thieves come, you will push the panic button and the KK will come. But I've always told the middle class that you will have no occasion. You yourself will be so panicked that you will not press the panic button. So it is in your own selfish interest to address the foundational questions. How do we deal with young men and women who are in unemployment? Look at where you live, all of you who are present here. Whether you live in Karen, there is a slum there is Kuwinda. If you live in Lavington, there is Kawangware there. If you live in Muthaiga, there is Mathare there. If you live in Runda, there is Githogoro there. If you live on Mombasa Road, there is Mukuruku and Jenga and Kware. In other words, there is a settlement of men and women who, when they say they have slept hungry, it means they have not eaten. You and your children say they are hungry is because they are debating between sausage and bacon. That is the nature of their hunger. So going forward, we must ask ourselves, how are we going to lead our institution? First of all, to persuade the political leadership that leadership requires something that makes people believe that they are part of the entire establishment. I normally like giving this analogy, which Dr. Dundo will understand more, is that when you have organized a dance, one of the unwritten rules of the dance is that the music player must be guarded very jealously because it is the source of joy. Those who want to destroy and to spoil your party will destroy the source of music. And therefore, wisdom ordinarily demands that you bring him in so that he sits inside the music and guard him and give him things that entertain him as you are enjoying your music. In other words, you keep your friends close, but your enemies even closer. That is the wisdom throughout the world. That is why one says, therefore, that one of the priorities that we must give its pride of place is negotiation. Not negotiation to introduce people into government, negotiation to understand what their problem is in the short term, in the medium term, and then in the long term. Number two, leadership is about having certain ideals. Nyerere used to put it so very well. Those of you who do not understand, I know Zé Foster now has lived here for longer than some of us and he knows these things. That leadership, you must have taboos, the things that you just don't do, and ideals. I'm submitting to us that in Kenya we don't have taboos. The things that miko na maadili in Kiswahili, miko, the things that you, when you are a leader, you don't do because they are not compatible with leadership. The Management Institute of Kenya was instituted in the 1960s to inculcate a sense of service to the people at a certain level. Today, who are the people that you have in? I will not name names, but I want you to look at the individuals whom we have elected into public office in Kenya. Across, just look at the governors who you have elected. Unless there is a polling change, you can rest assured that they put their hands in the till. Look at the individuals who had certain public institutions and their previous reputations. I remember at one time when I headed the Kenya Anti-Corruption Authority, we arrested a cabinet minister whom I shall not name. My members of my staff came to me, how do you arrest a cabinet minister? I said, like a thief. Then that cabinet minister said that my officer should go to his office. He said, so that the power dynamics are reversed, you come to our office. And he came. Then my officers asked, how do we fingerprint a cabinet minister? I said, like a thief. He was fingerprinted and he came to my office with his tribesmen and people from his political party and said, you are wasting my time. You take me to court and I'll be released in 1 week, and in 2 weeks he was released. Those are leaders. In other words, when you elect and appoint people into public office, there must be men and women who believe that there are certain things that you don't do. I'm submitting to us that those of you who have access to political power have a duty to tell political power that there are such men and women in this country. The The third thing that must happen in a multi-ethnic environment is that there must be an appearance of inclusivity. Today we talk about gender inclusivity, we talk about disability inclusivity and all these. When we were writing the Constitution, we had actually suggested that we should have some offices that do not make sense. Have the office of the President, the deputy, the vice president, first vice president, second vice president, prime minister, deputy president, and deputy prime minister. And we said that even with that, we'll only have a cabinet of 15, so that the vice president would be vice president and minister for something. But why did we suggest those offices? Because in countries such as ours, those offices, even if they have no function to perform, their people simply want to see somebody with a motorcade and it makes them feel good. You may not believe it, but in Africa it works. And even some of you here say in the unguarded moments when they are in their clan meetings, they plan how to have a flag. Even now, there are people in this room who, when they leave here tomorrow over the weekend, they'll be summoned to meetings of their tribes, at which they will discuss how to approach the President of the Republic of Kenya to appoint one of their own into cabinet, or to appoint one of their own as the chairman of some parastatal. Here, not anywhere else. Here, they are. I will not name them, because I do not know them. But they are here. And I'm submitting to us that as long as we are laboring under such primitive instincts, this country is going nowhere. So, I can go on and on. But let us also look at the question of governance, which, in a manner of sense, are Siamese twins with the whole question of leadership. You know why all of us have traveled, many of us have traveled and have marveled at what happens in Europe and America and in Japan. You go to a train station in Japan or in the United Kingdom and you can say that I'll leave by the 7 o'clock train. And you know that it will, holding all factors constant, come either be just before 7 or just after 7. Here, even when you call a meeting, this was an exception. The typical African so-called leader believes that when he comes late to disrupt affairs, then he is a leader. The Africans have this misguided view that leadership is about disrupting affairs, even in church. When everybody has sat, in these days of mobile phone, they even ring their hangers-on whom they send in advance. Say, have the people settled? Once he's been assured that the people have settled, then he comes with a bunch of white-chested individuals to disrupt the entire arrangement. I'm submitting to us that leadership is also about humility, which you don't see in this part of the world. But I was talking about doing the right things well, governance, having system. You know, when I go to the airport, and many of you go to the airport, once you've paid inside, you assume that the machines that have been installed there don't need any human aid. But for some reason, you still find somebody who takes your payment ticket and inserts into that thing. And I ask, why should I be allowed to do it? Governance and systems that work. You go to the roundabout, as you'll be living here, you spend billions in having those traffic lights to remove the human element. But for some reason, there is a competition between the traffic police and the machine. When it is green, the policeman, as if in defiance of the light, tells you to stop. When it is red, defying the traffic lights, it tells you to go. So that after some times, Kenyans are confused whether red means go or it is green that means go. Because of this unhealthy competition between police officers and the traffic lights. There is a sense in which governance is about doing things in the right way, in a predictable manner. Just this morning I was trying to book an appointment to meet somebody in a government ministry. And I rang twice in the morning. I'm told the person is busy. I said he's busy. Ring in 10 minutes. I rang in 10 minutes. He's still busy. I rang in 1 hour. And I said, what is this business? Because I've run a government office, I'm never too busy to see anybody. But somehow, African bureaucrats and Kenyan bureaucrats included also believe that the longer you delay in giving an appointment, the greater you are. I'm submitting to us that we must change that attitude. So that as I conclude, without belaboring the issue, because I'm not talking to people who do not, what I'm telling you, you know. Many of you have led organizations successfully, some unsuccessfully. But many who are here are successful individuals in their own right. I'm simply submitting and repeating to you that going forward in this country, we need what I've said at different forums, political hygiene. Political hygiene. And what is political hygiene? Political hygiene means, among other things, that people, men and women, are appointed into positions of responsibility on the basis of their merit. Number two, that in a multi-ethnic, diverse society, without sacrificing merit, that you also ensure that the diversity of the society is represented. Number three, that you appoint men and women who are prepared to serve selflessly, and that these individuals must be the custodians of people's wealth, and that if they are not good custodians, they belong to jail. I'm submitting that that can be achieved, and that if this country is to realize our potential, as she must, all of us must be prepared to speak, and we must speak with one voice. This is another problem that we have in Africa. In a setting such as this, all of us look like we love Kenya. All of us. You write a speech and read a speech that talks about Kenya, but when you go into your little ethnic cocoons, then you relapse into ethnic jingoism. I'm submitting to us that if we are ethnic jingoists, we must liberate ourselves from such jingoism from today. Because if we don't, before your very eyes, this country has no pact with God that it will remain united and peaceful forever. If you doubt it, ask the South Sudanese. If you doubt it, ask Central African Republic. If we play, and kumbukeni in Kiswahili mtego wa panya uingia waliomo na wasiokuwemo. When this country is destroyed, even if you are a multi-millionaire who owns this will become rubble. So if you don't do it for your country, do it for your own selfish reasons. And our combined selfishness will become patriotic somehow. So ladies and gentlemen, my submission is leadership is about service. It is about selfless service. In the history of this country now, what we must do is to do that which will preserve the country. Let's take care of youth unemployment. Let's take care of economic circumstances for our country. Let us take care of social cohesion. Let us speak the truth at all times. Let us engage with all leaders at all times. And I want to conclude with something, whether you are Muslim or Christian or Hindu, I want to conclude with this statement in the Bible. It is recorded in the book of 2 Samuel. It is a conversation to be found in chapter 12 of the book of Samuel. It is a conversation between the prophet Nathan and the prophet David. And it goes this way. Nathan goes to David and tells him that there was in some place a rich man who had many sheep, and there was another one who was very poor, who had only one lamb, and that he had fed this lamb so well and slept with this lamb in his house, and it was almost like his daughter. And when there was a visitor in the home of this rich man, instead of taking one from his flock, he took the one that was from this poor man. And Moses gets very angry and said, Brother David gets very angry and said, if there is such a man in my kingdom, that man must be punished fourfold. And Nathan tells him, that man is you, David. It is you, David, who have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite and caused him to be killed by the sword of the Amorites. The sword shall never leave your house. And that child that has been begotten out of that unholy union shall not leave. And he dies. And during the whole period that the child is sick and dying, David does not eat. And when on the 7th day the workers come to him and they see their faces, and he says, "Has the child died?" And he wakes up, goes into his house and dresses and eats. And the workers say, "How is it that when the child was still alive, you fasted and did not eat, and now that the child is dead, you are eating?" And he says, "When he was alive and well, I thought that the Lord God could intervene that he may live. But now that he is dead, I know that he's gone. And it is only I who will die and join him. He cannot join me." I give that story for two reasons. One, to remind us that when we are talking to officialdom, we must know how to do it. We can do it in the way of Nathan, so that he who is in leadership accuses himself. Or we can do it in the way of John the Baptist, going into the agora and shouting, and then Salome will ask for your head. And when you have lost something, also know when to stop mourning, because mourning in and of itself does not take you anywhere. So, fellow Kenyans, let us serve this country. Let us go and inspect our hearts. If we have sinned and fallen short of the glory of the expectations of this country by being ethnicists, let us take a solemn vow. I'm going to make a statement that is very morbid. Years' time, all of you here will have gone upstairs. And if you not be upstairs, your energy will have left you. Therefore, do it for yourself, and if not for yourself, for your children, and if not for them, for your children's children. God bless you.